I want to talk about it together as one big family, our goal for you. Because here's the deal, I'm going to let you know, I have a goal for you. And it's right there on the screens. My goal is simple for you guys, and that you come here often, is to loving you and leading you to life in Jesus. That's simple. That is my goal. I'm not selling you nothing. I'm not doing anything to my goal is simple. I want to love you guys well, but I don't want to just love you guys and be like, best friends with you. I want to lead you somewhere to life in Jesus. And I think the best part is that we could do that together. And that's my goal for you. And that's really simple, right? That's really great. But I really want to ask you a question tonight. Why are you here? Why are you here? Seriously. Did somebody invite you and this is your first time here and you're just kind of checking this out? Are you here because you've grown up and going to Fuse? You've been coming since you were 6th grade and it's just the thing to do on a Wednesday. Are you here because your parents forced you to be here? Are you here to hang out with your friends? Are you here just to try to do this religious duty so that you feel like God can love you more or be approved by God? Why are you here? And I really want to ask you that question. I really want you to be real with that question. Because for me, I am here to love and lead you to life in Jesus, not because I get paid for it, but that is my heart. And I remember as a youth group kid, the only reason really why I went to my youth group growing up, I was a youth group kid, I loved going to youth group, was because I wanted to hang out with my friends. That's really it. I would have told you it was because of Jesus. I would have told you the right churchy answer, but that wasn't the reason why I came. I came because I wanted to hang out with my friends. And honestly, that's not a bad reason. So if your reason tonight is just you want to hang out with friends, that's not the worst thing ever. But I really want you to wrestle with that question. Why are you here? Because my goal for you is to lead you into a flourishing relationship with Jesus. And you need to know why you're here, because that's kind of the starting point. If we're on a journey, if you see this black tape and I'm trying to get you over to there, I need to know where you start from. The GPS on your phone needs to know exactly where you are to get you where you want to be. And so my goal for you is for you to have a loving relationship with Jesus. But I need to know where your starting point is. Because if your starting point is, hey, I want to grow my relationship with Jesus. I want to experience God more. I want to love him and I want to experience his love more. That's good. That's good. That's a good starting point. But if your starting point is, yeah, I don't really care. I'm just here to just hang out, whatever. I really don't care what you're talking about, stuff like that. Then that's good. Listen, that's not good, but I'm glad that you're figuring that out if that's your starting point. Because this, loving and leading you to life in Jesus is good, but I feel none of you really know what that means. So I want to make that goal, I want to make that end finish line even more simple. And it's on the next slide. I want you to follow Jesus. But the thing is, you need to have faith to follow Jesus. Every single one of you, you need to have faith. You need to have faith if you want to follow Jesus. And so some of you are no duh. Of course you need to have faith to do this Christianity thing. That's what this is. You need to have faith. Of course, that's a churchy term. And some of you are I don't know what he's talking about, blah, 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 whatever. And I think there's pretty much two camps. There's one camp of you that kind of grown up in church. You kind of know these phrases. You live in called the Bible Belt. So you've kind of grown up in church. So some of you know these words, but you really actually, if pressed, and you really were if I were to press you, I'm hey, what does actually faith mean? You wouldn't actually know what faith is. I believe that, because here's the deal. I think because we live in this church culture, because I grew up in this church culture, things get tossed around, and sometimes I don't even know what they mean. And I think I want to bring some clarity on that, because if I want you to follow Jesus, to have life in Jesus, you need faith to do that. Some of you won't cross this line tonight in having faith in Jesus because you don't have faith in Jesus, and you don't know what that is. I want to make that crystal clear tonight. Because you need faith. If you want to start following Jesus, you need faith to follow in Jesus. And here's the deal. Because we've grown up in just the atmosphere of church, I call it churchianity, we can totally miss following Jesus. We can totally miss following Jesus, the real Jesus. Because sometimes church and culture and maybe different worldviews and maybe from different perspectives, like, will tell you this is what Jesus is and this is who Jesus is. Like, you have to behave better. You don't do this. You say this. You act right. You talk nice to your parents. But is that actually the real Jesus? Or is the real Jesus, you have to adapt to this type of culture. You have to listen to this music. You have to like these artists. You have to like Elevation. You have to like Maverick City. You have to like Stephen Furtick. Is that what it means to be a follower of Jesus, is just adapt to this culture? What is it about following Jesus? And I think this is so clear. Listen, we're all on so many different boats. Some of you don't care about following Jesus tonight. Some of you do. Some of you are not sure. But we need to really get a clear definition of this word faith if we're actually going to follow Jesus. Does that make sense? And as I'm talking to 5th graders and 12th graders tonight, I think it's so important that we lean into what this word actually means and not miss it, what it actually means to follow Jesus and not miss it. And so I love the Bible. And I want to open up the Bible to Matthew chapter 9. And I want to start encouraging you. I stopped for a while, but I want to encourage you. Bring your own Bibles. Don't bring a digital, I mean, it's cool that you have your phones, but bring an actual physical Bible. And I'm going to tell you why in the next coming weeks, why that's so important, and actually how to help you navigate that. But I want to start with an interesting story in Matthew 9 that I think, honestly, here's the deal. And especially if you've grown up in church, listen, it's going to blow your categories tonight. It's not going to make sense at first. Because it didn't for me. It didn't when I was reading this. This didn't fit in my Christianity box like 20 years into following Jesus. I'm not that old. I'm not 200 years old. But I want to start in Matthew chapter 9. Something's charging. Matthew chapter 9, verse 27. And this is a story about faith and about Jesus. It says this: after Jesus left this girl's home, two blind men were followed along behind him, shouting, "Son of David, have mercy on us." Now, I want to stop right there. Two blind men go up to Jesus and they say, "Son of David, have mercy on us." Now think, why would two blind men say this? They can't see Jesus. I'm assuming that people were talking, "Hey, yo, this is that Jesus guy. Let's go to him. Hey, this is Jesus guy. He's doing stuff. He's healing people. He's like, we should go to." Because last time I checked, blind people don't see. So I don't know how they saw Jesus coming, but they go up to him and say this phrase, "Son of David, have mercy on us." Now, you probably don't know what that means, and that's okay. But that's so significant because these two blind men, for the first time, called Jesus a really important title. For the first time in the book of Matthew, if you were to read the book of Matthew, these two blind men called Jesus such an important title. Now, if you remember a couple months ago when we talked about what that word Messiah means, that Jesus was the hero for humanity, that there's this history leading up to Jesus as the climax of the story of the Bible, that Son of David was that phrase that people used to use, that, hey, this hero, this king, this Messiah is going to come and he's going to be a son of David. And blind people, two blind men, called Jesus for the first time out of anyone, with his disciples, with people, call him by his actual title. Do you see the significance of this? Think about the implications of this. Who are the first people to actually see Jesus? Two blind men. Isn't that crazy? The first people to actually see Jesus were two blind men. How can blind people actually see? It didn't work back, like blind people were blind, couldn't see back then. It's the same as it is today, same back then. Like, how does this make any sense? And this, I want to talk about three faiths here tonight that are probably the three faiths the majority of you have tonight. And I want to talk about that these two blind men experience, and they have a faith called an open mind faith. And they have an open mind about who Jesus is. And some of you don't like this phrase that I just used, that they're an open mind. Because an open mind is attached to like, oh my gosh, open minds, that means he's gonna be okay with everything and fall into like theological liberalism and all this stuff. But think about what I'm saying for a second. That these blind people who can't see, how are they gonna walk with Jesus? How are they gonna follow Jesus? They have to have an open mind. Not to whatever, not to all these different teachers and philosophies and world religions. No, they have an open mind to Jesus. They have an open mind to Jesus. And that is a really good starting point and a really good faith to have. Think about these for a second. These men are in a helpless state. In a time and a culture when you were blind, you were an outcast. You probably did whatever you could to try to get fixed and get right. You probably went to a bunch of religious temples and sorcery. You tried to do everything you could to get healed, to see again. And because back then, the culture and the time and the teaching was like, hey, if you have like blind issues, or if you like don't have an arm for some reason, like that's because there's this history in your family that's full of sin, and God hates you and God's putting a curse on you. And so these blind men probably did everything they could to try to be right and be healed. And maybe that's where you're at today. Maybe that's your response here tonight. That's your faith tonight. Because you've tried everything. You've tried everything you could to try to get right, to try to feel whole, to try to feel a sense of purpose. That you did everything that your friends told you to do. That you did everything that your culture told you to do. You did everything that your cousins told you to do, your friends told you to do. Like you did everything, but it's still not enough. You did everything your Sunday school teacher told you to do, and you still don't feel connected to God. We'll talk about this faith more, but we need to start. If you're gonna start following Jesus, you need to have an open mind about who Jesus is. And some of you are totally closed off. You don't trust him. That you totally close off to all this stuff, but I want you to humble yourself. If you're gonna start following Jesus, if you're actually going to experience life in Jesus, to have an open mind to who he is. The story goes on to verse 28, and I'm gonna read it. It says this: they went right into the house where he was staying, and Jesus asked them, do you believe I can make you see? He's talking to the blind man. He says, yes, Lord. They told him, we do. Then he touched their eyes and said, because of your faith, it will happen. Then their eyes were open and they could see. Jesus sternly warned them, don't tell anyone about this. But instead, they went out and spread his fame all over the region. When they left, a demon-possessed man who couldn't speak was brought to Jesus. So Jesus cast out the demon, and then the man began to speak. The crowds were amazed. Nothing like this has ever happened in Israel, they exclaimed. And now the next faith in this story. Maybe some of you here tonight experience this as a curious type of faith. See, we just read a story about these crowds, and often the crowds in the Gospels are not like the best sort of people, because the crowds would see Jesus do all these things, but they wouldn't follow him. And maybe that's you tonight, that you believe in God, that you have this idea about God, who God is, but you've never really experienced him for yourself. See, we go around singing like, Jesus is going to heal you, Jesus is going to do all these stuff, but Jesus, when he was on earth, didn't heal everybody. But maybe you see Jesus work in other people's lives, and you're curious about him, and you want to follow him, but maybe because he hasn't done anything for you recently, that you're not committing yourself to him. The crowds had this curious faith, but they wouldn't follow Jesus. They would be kind of on the border of putting their trust in Jesus. And maybe that's you tonight. That you know about God, but you don't want to follow him because of your reasons. And that's a faith that some of you probably have here tonight. And then the passage goes on and says this. But the story goes on and says this, but the Pharisee said he can cast out demons because he's empowered by the prince of demons. So this thing happened. A demon-possessed man gets healed by Jesus. Crazy. Crowds are like, oh my goodness, that's crazy, but I don't want to follow him. But then we got these Pharisees. And if you don't know what that means, that just means religious leaders of the time. And what is so interesting is that these people, these religious Bible teachers, have the third faith tonight. And it's a closed mind faith. That they see Jesus do all these things, but they write him off as whatever. That they have a closed mind about who Jesus is. They've already concluded who Jesus is. Do you see the implications of that tonight? I think what this story is trying to tell us right now in this moment, that if you've even a religious leader, a person that's genuinely trying to get the thing right. We always, like in church culture, bash the Pharisees, and it's so easy, like, and preachers do it all the time. I've done it too, but here's the deal. They were trying to get it right. They were doing everything they thought was right, but they were closed off to who Jesus was. And the implications of that for us today is that you can grow up in this church thing, and you could do all the right thing. You could grow up in Sunday school, but completely miss who Jesus is. That you could completely be closed off to who he actually is. Because why? The same reason with the Pharisees. They thought they had it all together. They thought they had all the answers. And when you walk with Jesus, and when you come to Jesus, and when you have a faith that's closed off to the way of Jesus, you will miss him. When you think you have all the right answers, when you know all the Bible stories, so there's no reason why to read your Bible, or when you do all the things that you're supposed to do, you can actually totally miss who Jesus is, because they already concluded who he was. So we got two events. One event, Jesus heals blind people. Another, heals a demon possessed. But three very different responses. And I think those three responses is exactly what we're going through, like you guys are going through right here and now. Maybe you're open to Jesus, and you're open to what he has to say, and not just always assuming you know everything, but genuinely with a humble heart pursuing him. Maybe you're kind of curious about him, but not willing to commit to him. And maybe you're just totally closed off to him. And you could be a Christian in doing that. You could be a not Christian in doing that. But you're just totally closed off to who Jesus is. And so which faith are you? Which faith are you? And how do you get to this faith? How do you get to this faith? Well, it's simple. When Jesus wanted to heal the blind man, he said, the reason why this is happening to you, the reason why I'm about to heal you is because of your faith. And it's because of what type of heart posture you have. And so if you notice something, as part of my teaching technique tonight, I never defined what faith is. I talked about faith, but I never defined faith. I told you in the beginning that you probably don't know what faith is. So what is faith? Is faith just having this hope and expectation? What is faith? Is faith just a belief system? What is faith? Well, from this story, from these three different positions, we can conclude what faith is not. Being closed off to Jesus and being closed off to what he actually has to say. And not by what teacher says, not by interpretations, not by maybe your Sunday school teacher or what you think is right, but by what actually Jesus says. It's a closed mind thinking you know everything you need to know. But when you come to Jesus, your mind should be opened, not to everything, but to who Jesus is and what he's doing. And that should birth in you a new realm of possibilities of life that is not a controlling life, that's not a life to suck the joy out of you, but a life to give you freedom and joy and purpose. And some of you are like, man, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see it. I don't believe. I don't get this whole faith thing. Well, I don't know if you know who C.S. Lewis is, but C.S. Lewis was in the mid-1900s, he was a full-on atheist, did not believe in God until he did some research and said, you know what, I'm not going to trust what everyone else says. I'm going to do this for real. I'm going to have an open mind about Jesus. And then he later put his faith in Jesus, and he says this, and this is one of my favorite quotes from C.S. Lewis. He says, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen. Not only because I see it, but because by it, I see everything else. And so when you come to Jesus and you have an open mind of who Jesus is, that should birth in you a whole new way of living. And so what is faith? What is faith? If you're going to take a step and follow Jesus and get life and life abundantly, faith is simply this. Faith is trust. Faith is trust. That's why I opened up with that video before. That you actually going to, you know what? I'm going to trust who Jesus is and what he actually says. And I'm going to trust him with my entire life. And this is coming to an vulnerable state that you don't know everything. and opening yourself to who Jesus actually is and coming to the conclusion that you don't know everything and that you're following and trusting, giving your life over to who Jesus is. And so I just want to leave you with this question as we close tonight. How much do you trust in Jesus tonight? If faith is trust, how much do you trust in Jesus tonight? For your life, for the way you think, for the worldview that you hold on to, for everything. How much do you actually trust in Jesus? Do you believe he's good? Do you believe he's got good plans for you? Not to make you have a lot of money, but to give you a life that's full of peace and full of joy. Not filled with anxiety, not filled with heartache, not filled with brokenness. That Jesus actually wants to make you whole, but you have to trust him. You have to have faith in him. And it's not just you muster up enough faith and just try to muster up enough knowledge. No. Jesus will meet you where you're at. But you just need to be opened to him. Does that make sense? My goal for you is to have life in Jesus. You need to start following Jesus. But the thing is, you need to have faith to do that. And to get faith is to get trust in Jesus. So I want to pray with every head bowed and every eyes closed.